Hey everybody, welcome to today's video going over the state of the game. I just wanted to start off by saying that this video, I don't want it to come off as like a negative video. I want to just kind of go over a little bit of feedback I have based on the article. And of course, to start off, this is still my favorite game to play. I want it to do well. I'm just not sure that Bungie's leadership is willing to make the investment in the game and the players needed to make it the game the community's been asking for years at this point. They're likely banking on other games doing really well, like Marathon and upcoming Matter, which could be a mistake because if you burn your core player base, they may just never trust another Bungie game, and that will hurt Marathon and Coding Matter. So my feedback is aimed specifically at the leadership and not on the developers who maintain the game day to day or build the content. It's not up to them where the development dollars are being spent, and they're just doing their job as they're asked to do as well as they can. The art team, of course, is always stellar. The game is still beautiful and visually stunning to play, as long as the servers are working, of course. But I remember when I first played the game on PC, when the game moved over to PC, just being in awe of how good the game looked at like 100 plus, 100 to 240 FPS. And I remember just going to destinations, just standing there and just looking at how things played and how smooth the game was. And it was just something to behold, and I've never had another experience like it in any other game that I've ever played. So, having said that, I waited a little bit to make this video because I wanted to let the bigger creators make their videos so that I can watch and get a feel for how everybody's kind of taking in the state of the game, and to get a feel for the community sentiment in the comments and the creator sentiments overall. So I watched like Cross's video about his thoughts on it, True Vanguard's video about him leaving the Destiny creator community for a short period of time so that he can focus on variety gaming for his family and to make his money. I watched TDT's video about him signing off of Destiny for a bit because he just doesn't really have the desire or the will anymore. He's kind of burnt out based on the changes that Destiny's making that are kind of cutting him out, cutting his niche out of the game. Even older creators that I haven't watched, in a bit, are having that same kind of mentality. Creators that I do watch regularly that are even sometimes small, I watch a creator named Chablo. He's also struggling with trying to figure out what to do. He does a lot of solo content. Grenadier Jake, of course, trying to go variety, and that's crazy to think because Grenadier Jake is like Trials. I think when you think of Trials of Osiris, you think Grenadier Jake, and he's done it for so long. He's the most winningest Trials player. He's carried the most people to the lighthouse. So for some staple like that to move on and try to kind of supplement his content also speaks volumes. And I think if as a manager of a game or as a CEO, I would take that as a failure, and I would really be reflecting on myself on what I did wrong to push somebody like that to kind of move away from the game. Paul Tassi normally is kind of in between Destiny and the community. He's kind of sometimes siding on Destiny's side, trying to explain it, sometimes on the community side. Even this time around, he's well on the community side. He's trying to give Destiny as much leeway and as much benefit of the doubt as he can, but even he sees like, hey, this is not going well. And lastly, Cami Cakes, I was watching his video, and he was actually fairly positive compared to what I thought he was going to be, because normally Cammy is very like exacting, and he's like very specific in what he wants, and he had a different kind of video where he went over his wish list first and then actually read the state of the game, which was fresh and something different than some of the other creators. A funny story about Cammy, and the reason why I bring him up, is because Cammy Cakes was the very first Guardian that I ever spoke to on the Destiny forums back in early D1 when D1 released. Because in D1 beta I didn't really get on the forums. I've been played since D1 beta on Xbox, and so there I played with my friends, and I ended up kind of being pushed into the Warlock class because one of my friends wanted Hunter and the other of my friend wanted to play Titan, so I was like, fine, I'll do Warlock and maybe do support if that's what it was. And so I've been a Warlock main ever since. That's kind of my story about how I ended up being a Warlock main. I just took whatever was left, and then I fell in love with the class. And so whenever I first got into Destiny and started going onto forums and talking about the game and kind of what I was thinking needed to be better, Cammy was the very first person to respond to one of my posts and kind of have like a little back and forth, and he had some pretty good insights even back then. So I've always kept up with him. I just thought it was really a funny story that he's like the first Guardian that I've ever talked to outside of my friend group, and so and he's still making content to this day. So to go over some of the things that I'm excited for before we get into some of the feedback, I'm excited for the final shape. I really want to see how the story ends, but I also want to see, if they can kind of put their money where their mouth is. Like in the state of the game, they've really talked about like a lot of the updates that they're going to be doing. They talk about changing the game in a way where they're going to be kind of pushing players to do things that they haven't done before according to them. And so I'm kind of going to scroll down here so you can see where they talk about how they're going to step up the game by expanding imagination, giving us new ways to play or new ways to interact with the game, bringing challenge back to Destiny, which means that hopefully the final shape will actually have mechanically challenging enemies and encounters, because what players really want, and a lot of the players that I've played with that are on the upper end, that are kind of playing at the bleeding edge, like day one players, they've all come from games where the challenges are not like a big health pool on the boss, or getting knocked off a map, or cheap things, cheap ways of dying, like having a floor that you can fall through at some point because of some enemy booping you off the side, or having an ability not work, like Strand, for example. Your grapple doesn't exactly grapple a grapple point, even though you're aiming right at it, because of some code issue or distance, and you fall to your death. Like stuff like that doesn't really happen in the games that a lot of these players come and they play the high end stuff. I remember playing World of Warcraft at the high end and being one of the better guilds on our server, and doing everything that you could possibly do, clearing all of the highest end difficulty encounters. And in the best encounters, it was always execution. It was like, can you stand in the right place? Can you dodge this particular ability that's been telegraphed? Are you watching your boss timers? Are you doing your rotation appropriately to keep yourself alive and doing the maximum damage that you can? Are you standing in the right place? Are you with the right group? Are you helping your healers? Just by using your cooldowns to keep yourself alive, using your survivability instead of being a drain on the healers, which are spamming for their life to keep you alive. And then on the healer side, same thing. The healers, you have to like constantly be watching your meters and constantly being taking advantage of your hotkeys just to keep up with the encounter. Like that's real difficulty, not I'm going to fall off a map, or I'm going to be insta-killed by some ability that I can't do anything about, or die from doing a finisher because of a bug, and then having to be rezzed there. And so, like, that stuff didn't exist, really. Like, Destiny was the first game that I can really think of where you would lose entire encounters and you would lose, like, 20 or 30 minutes of your life just because of a bug that the developers haven't had a chance to fix yet, or something that was there on day one. Like, I never experienced that with other games that I played. This is the first game where you've had to kind of deal with that type of Bungie, quote unquote Bungie wipe. You got bungeed basically because of some bug, or you get error coded and everybody's got to start over. Like that stuff just didn't happen on the World of Warcraft side of things, and other games that are similar to that. Again, because most games were like a box, method of delivering the game, meaning that it was shipped fully complete, and the worst thing you had to wait for is maybe like a day one patch as you were downloading the game to fix some of the issues that were seen right before launch. And this is the first game again that I've ever experienced that type of failure that's out of your control, just kind of losing because the game is not built well enough at the release, since it's a live service game, so it's a whole different beast. And so those things you take into account, you get used to it, you soldier on, that's just kind of how you play the game. But a lot of the players that come from those other very polished games come into here and have that feedback, and there's really nothing that's can be done or that's been done about it. And whenever they talk about it, it's always like, we're going to do something, and it ends up just kind of being the same story. It just ends up being like corporate speaker lip service, and that's kind of going to go into a little bit of what I talk about going forward. So, for example, too, they're also going to be making changes to exotics. I hope those go well and they're not buggy. And then the new exotics that are brought back from the vault basically are so overpowered or have issues that again they're going to be disabled, because Bungie constantly has an issue where they will make an exotic, or they'll bring an old exotic back and it's so bugged, or it's in a state where it can be exploited, and then you can't even play with that exotic. Like, I forget, I think it was last season where there was 2 exotics out of the 3 exotics that were released brand new, and they were disabled, and you couldn't even play with the new stuff that you paid for. And that's another thing that, again, that people forget is that we paid for this stuff. It's in the advertisement whenever you try to buy the game. It's like part of the game that you're buying, and so you can't. I mean, people they can think whatever they want, but I always find it silly whenever they're like, oh, Bungie doesn't owe us anything, so on and so forth, and I'll get into that as well more. But like that type of attitude of like you're being entitled, it's like I could understand if you were asking for things that were not advertised and you were upset in the same fashion, but it's not entitled to hold somebody accountable for delivering on a promise when you paid for something. Like in other industries, when you have an item like a car, for example, and you buy the car and it's not up to the standards in which it was advertised to you, you have a warranty and they fix your car for you under warranty. Of course, if all things go well, if not, you have to sue and so on and so forth. But gamers don't have that type of restitution available. All we can do is just complain and give feedback and hope that it's taken in because of the way that the terms of service are written in the game. Bungie could do whatever they want, take back whatever they want, and delete your character whenever they want, and you really can't do nothing about it because you have to sign those end-user agreements to get into the game. And that's kind of we're in that situation where we're just at their mercy, and they did that on that purpose to protect themselves from stuff like that, and not having to abide by like the law, like the merchant laws that normally apply to other industries when you promise something and then you deliver a subpar product and have to warranty that promise. They don't have that same type of pressure on them because of their end user agreements and because all this stuff is digital and quote unquote make believe. They don't have to deal with that, even though nowadays with more things being digital, and I would argue they probably should, but that's a whole nother topic, and I don't even know if I'd ever make a video going into like the legalities of not delivering and stuff like this. So now that we've kind of talked about the things that I am excited for and kind of my worries on those things, I want to go into some of the things that they discussed. So, for example, like just to lightly touch on the Crucible improvements, I want to just kind of review those really fast because I do play Crucible, but I can't really speak to these much until they're actually in the game, because a lot of the times they've promised us these things, then we get them in game, and it's like, what? Like the eruption was broken when they first had the eruption game mode in Iron Banner, and then same thing with the other Iron Banner where you were just basically, it was Bubble City. Like those things sounded cool, but then in practice they were like, what is this? Like, why didn't you think of this? How could you not have avoided this? Why would you design it this way? Like, who's making these decisions? Like, who actually decided not to consult like top end players and say, okay, if we built this for you, what would be your your meta, and then say, okay, how do we adjust this so that this meta just can't dominate and become the only way to play this game mode, for example, right? And like on the eruption side of things, you would erupt and it was bugged that it would give your enemy team so much points that it was like better not to get to that point. It was better to get your streak to a point right before you were about to erupt and then just kill yourself so that the other team wouldn't get the points and then swing back and they end up winning because they were getting their butts kicked and then they killed the one guy at the end. So stuff like that can happen with these PvP things. So I'm really excited for the multiplex map. I hope it looks really cool. It's something that seems kind of new, and I hope that they've found a way to like allow engagements to happen on different levels based on the way that the map looks and how the Vex network normally works. It would be kind of cool to having a fight go on above you, and then at the same time you're underneath it, and then some people from that fight end up falling down in front of you, and then you have another battle going on. Kind of nice little dynamic changes like that. I've always liked maps like that where there's those different levels. Like the Firebase map in D1 where you had your fights outside in the desert, but at the same time you have a fight going on right above you in the window and you can jump in and join the fight that's in the main hallway, and then there's a fight in the back. So it's pretty cool to see that that's where they're going with that. Checkmate is basically them trying to revert the game back to Destiny 1. Whenever we were playing Destiny 1 and Destiny 1 PvP and Trials and Double Primaries, that was pretty much the game. Kami made a good point about the fact that with this game it's going to lead to more double primary play, and it also makes you wonder why you would even bring a special weapon into this mode, because you're going to start out with no ammo. You have to earn the ammo. Depending on how long and how arduous that process is to earn the ammo, you'll be putting yourself at a disadvantage by having a weapon that's only going to cover a set amount of range or specialize in a set amount of range. So if you're there with a scout, you have no close range unless you run an SMG or sidearm, right? And if you're running something that's like a hand cannon, you'll have that mid-range to close range kind of ish, but if somebody pushes you too hard, again, no close range like a shotgun, and you can't reach out and touch somebody with a sniper yet. So you have to really like have that engagement in that middle range. And if it's going to be Halo-ish with it comes to like TTKs, where like your overshields feel like you have a ton of overshields, and you can just disengage, run to the other side of the map while your overshield is coming back, and then try to then re-engage. Like a lot of these fights are just going to be a bunch of peek shooting and a bunch of people just hiding. Like right now, for example, in Trials, when you play top-end Trials players, they'll take 2 hits and they disappear, you don't see them again. And the other team will push up with you low health and try to kill you since you were just in that engagement. This is basically going to have to be that way, but it's like, how are you going to have that kind of scenario? Are you going to be able to run through an enemy team that's shooting at you because you have so much health to kill that player and secure that kill? And then are you even going to be able to put on streaks because you're going to be trying to secure those kills of these players who just run away and play the game like so incredibly frustrating because they lost the fight and they know they lost the fight but they don't want to die, and then you have to then sacrifice yourself to get that kill. And so like, what is that going to turn into? So until I see it, it's really hard to be excited for something like this, because again, the way you get special ammo is going to make or break that particular playlist when it comes to even having special ammo in that playlist. Because if not, then it's just basically double primary and maybe bring a heavy in. Cammy even had a great suggestion of having a 3rd slot so that you have your double primaries, and then you can then switch over to the special slot whenever you get special ammo, and that takes over as your gun. That would be pretty cool to have something like that, but of course it's already built, so I doubt that they can make changes on that in time. Relic's going to be fun, just like Mayhem is fun. I'm going to really enjoy running around with the Scythe from Season of the Haunted and flying around with the Synaptic Spear trying to hit people, and then of course trying to hit the Synaptic Spear people are going to be tough because you can teleport with those. And then you have people running around with the Aegis just blocking everything because for trolling people. It's going to be a lot of fun trolling kills probably coming out of that. Matchmaking improvements, can't trust it. They've been talking about matchmaking for years. I'll believe it when I see it. And in Season 23 they talk about some of the new changes and the new weapons and things, and the weapons don't seem very appealing. We have a lot of the same stuff. If you've been playing for a while, you have a lot of the same stuff. If you've been playing for a while, you basically have all of the good weapons that should be fitting in those categories. So these weapons are just going to be kind of new side things to maybe mess around with, but won't take advantage of the meta, for example, and they're not going to take over your current meta weapons. With the Vanguard playlists, it's tough, to get people invested in something like that because we've been playing it for years. If you've been playing for a long time, a lot of the new players will end up playing in the Vanguard playlist. So, it's something that it's going to be hard to bring back a current player into that. But that brings me to Gambit, and so that was kind of one of the main things. So it's rest in peace Gambit, because with Gambit, instead of going around and looking at feedback of players that actually love to play Gambit and enjoy playing Gambit, instead of going to like Gambit discords and looking for original ideas and just trying something way outside the box, just so that it's something new, so that we can have a little bit of something new. And even if every season they have to tweak it a little bit so that it's slightly different, that would be amazing to me. Like for Gambit and Trials, for example, I never understood why they never went back to some of the Halo game modes where like there was that shotgun snipers only game mode, swords and shotties only game mode. Like you could do something like that every week where it's like there's a weapon of the week for Gambit or weapon of the week for Trials, and so there's like 2 or 3 weapons that you can choose from and everything else is disabled, and you have to like engage with those weapons for that week. And you can have like like a scout and sidearm week. You can have like a sniper and hand cannon week, for example. Just things that really mesh well. And you can also have like some silly stuff where it's like only close range weapons, only long range weapons, and see how players kind of handle and deal with those things. And even if you wanted to have like 2 modes, you know what I mean, just so that people can have a chance to play regularly if they want to, you could do that too. And then have players say, I want to play something different, they can do that. So there's like a lot of different options that they have, and they just chose to do none of it. and a lot of it ties back into what we'll go over with the Crucible, because again, they're really focusing on things that they can monetize and things that they believe make them money, and they're a little short-sighted on that. And I'll also get into that a little bit later. Um, and that brings me back into, you know, what Bungie and a lot of people are trying to defend Bungie with, about how they don't owe us anything. For example, like people are saying, Bungie doesn't owe us anything. They're doing what they need to do for as their company and what they think is best, and so on and so forth. And it's fine to take that position, but just realize that Bungie does owe us more than you think. When Bungie was about to die, they were like weeks away from closing their doors. The community rallied behind them. We spent money. We bought things in the Eververse store. We allowed the Eververse store to continue, because there was a time in which player sentiment was so poor that they were almost forced to get rid of the Eververse store, or to scale back the Eververse store so hard that it was basically just, like an optional thing, and it didn't really like kind of leak into the game the way that it is right now with the Bright Dust setup. Because right now it still kind of has its fingers in the game with Bright Dust, because you got your Bright Dust, which then tempts you to go into the store, in which they then now will flash you things that they think that you'll buy with your your page that's tuned for you, which completely slows down the store on PC, by the way. And so it still has its tendrils in the game, and we've known this as a player base for a long time, that the Eververse store is not healthy for the game. But in the end, they used that money to then give us these experiences, so we understood that. So as players, we straight up like financed Bungie, and then what they do as like a thanks to us is they say, we see that you want these things, we know that you want these things, but we're going to go in a different direction, and this is why. Like, that's basically the sentiment that everybody's holding from the setup that they have here. And I'll go into a little bit more on that later, as far as like how I felt like this particular state of the game was a lot of like patting themselves on the back and saying, oh, we did all these things, and look at all these things we did, and then we see that you want these things, and we're addressing your feedback, but we're not going to do those things, we're going to do this. And so that's like a slap in the face again for a lot of people. I personally didn't care, because I'm at the point right now where I'm just kind of apathetic to these things, but I can totally understand how people get riled up and upset about these things. And I definitely read it the way that a lot of other people read it, and was like, wow, I can't believe they said it like that, or at least they allowed this sentiment to come through in the communication, which falls back on the communication teams. So they repaid us and our goodwill by purposely under delivering on their games as well. Because remember, they had that snippet that was part of the GCX where he said, you don't want to over deliver, because then you create these unrealistic expectations. But is it really, like, you know what I mean, that hard to actually deliver? Like, because I understand you're over delivering, but now you're under delivering, and there is no actual delivering. You're just purposely under delivering on purpose, and then you're going to deliver, or try to deliver, once every year on expansions. But that's not how it should be. Like, if it was my company again, and I had the reins, I would over deliver once a year at least. I would have one Forsaken a year to keep the game going and keep the game alive, because Forsaken has fueled us for years at this point. That high of Forsaken has kept people around this long, and we're just now kind of hitting that super low that we were feeling from the last season into this season. Like, this season was a nice pickup. It would actually be a lot lower if Season of the Deep wasn't as good as it was. Season of the Deep was a pretty good season as far as story, and as far as like the actual gameplay, the dungeon, if you could afford it, for example, because of the way they broke out the dungeons and made it to where people could buy the season and not the dungeon. Like, again, just ridiculous decision making. Who in the right mind allows things to ship like that when it comes to monetizing and making it to where it's attractive for players to buy these things, and pricing these things out to where players can buy these things? Again, they should all be bundled. It should be an option, and it should be clear in the game and outside of the game in the Steam store that this is what you're getting. So very frustrating on that aspect. But they kind of talked about how, again, PvP and Gambit is not monetizable. A lot of free-to-play players are playing this, and it's like, why even open the game of free-to-play if you're going to complain about free-to-play players not spending money, number one. But secondly, the players that do play the PvP and Gambit are usually players that buy the game. Like, they bought the game, they own the game, and they keep buying the expansions, and they keep buying the seasons. And so it's kind of silly to and short-sighted to say we're not going to focus on these things because they don't make money, but they do. Like, they contribute to player retention, they contribute to player engagement. The same players who are playing PvP and playing Gambit are on the Ever Restore buying the armors. You know, they're spending time in the game, and they're kind of keeping your numbers up so that you can then show, like for example Sony, how well you're doing as a live service game and get the billions of dollars that you did. So that all contributes, and the fact that in this particular article they don't acknowledge that in saying that, hey, you know, we understand that you want these things but we can't, but at the same time, thank you for your contribution, thank you for playing, we appreciate all of that. Like, that was all just skipped over. It was just, you know, we delivered this and this, and you should be happy, and now we're going to move in a different direction. Even though the things that they go on about delivering, so like in the Crucible for example, they talk about the new game modes, the revamps, Trials of Osiris, comp, like all of those things were failures for the most part. Like, Trials of Osiris is still needing work. You know, the comp is still being complained about. It's still not right. Like, the matchmaking is still not right. Fireteam matchmaking sounded great in theory, but ended up being rough on a lot of the player base that actually plays the game regularly. So, you know, there's these improvements that are supposed to be good. They end up taking away player choice. So, like, for example, you don't get to choose if you want to play freelance or not. You just have to jump in, and then it creates this mode where it's like, you know, it's easier for solo and duo players than for players who have a team of 3, which, you know, again, selfishly it helps me because I play usually solo, and if I had like one friend playing, maybe I could play with one friend and have that easier, you know, time of going flawless, for example. But I can understand, again, the people that play 3v3, people that are being carried, those people are having a hard time playing as a group, and Destiny was supposed to be about playing with your friends. Now, again, I'm a solo player, so I understand and I appreciate them making the game more inviting to solo players, and I think that that also helps grow the player base. But it's still kind of spitting in the face of the original version of Destiny and the original Trials experience, that 3v3 experience. Whenever they make these changes, and they just leave them and they just kind of let them sit. As Cool Guy said in his video, I think they have like a ship and sit mentality, and so, you know, that again is part of why things are festering, because you just put these things out there and you're like, here they are, but you don't maintain them, you don't tweak them, and you don't even consider that because you are like, again, saying that development is hard and it costs us so much money. And even though we have these billions of dollars, the things that we're going to develop and our budget is going to stay the same, and we're not going to put any money outside of this budget to player sentiment and to player goodwill, because no matter what we do, everybody's always upset at everything. Which is a silly thing to look at, because a lot of their communications are getting through Twitter and through other really toxic places where people just are like terminally on the internet and they don't give feedback appropriately, or their feedback is not clear. It's just really just complaining, and to take that subset of people, or like on Reddit for example, and then paint that to all the large player base that doesn't even go on social media at all, they just log in and play your game, is again short-sighted and silly to paint that type of mentality over everybody. And I'll again address that a little further when we talk about management and how they handle communications at Bungie, for example. Speaking of new players as well, going back on, you know, kind of coming back into the game, like, it's amazing how there's like no way for new players to just buy like one thing on the Steam store, or to buy just one bundle on the Sony or Xbox stores and just catch up to everybody. Like, it's nobody's really going to be that upset if for $60 a player can buy all of the old expansions except for Lightfall and get all of the seasonal content capabilities prior to the last season and catch up to us so that they can play with us. Like, there's very few people that are going to be so mad at that, because we've already spent the money and we've already experienced these seasons that these players have missed out on, and they're not going to get that experience. So why is it such a problem to just make like one $60 legacy pack that gets you everything prior to the current season and catches you up, including raids and dungeons, so that new players can get in? Or if you were going to piece it out, you could have like everything except for raids and dungeons in one, and then you spend like another 40 to get all the raids and dungeons, however you want to do it. But for that same amount of money, these players, if you look at the Steam store, they have to spend like $400 if they want everything, and then sometimes that over $400 is overspending because they're buying things that are already bundled in separate places. And in Cool Guy's video, you can see he specifically pulls it up and shows like these are the things that players can buy, and if they buy these two things, they're just straight wasting money. And then it feels like they've been kind of conned. It feels deceptive, and at this point, with as many players giving this feedback, it is deceptive. It's like purposely deceptive of like the Bungie accounting department to look at this and say, oh, well, they can accidentally buy this and we'll get some additional revenue that way. We're going to raise the amount of the season so that you can't just buy the $1,000 silver bundle. You have to buy the next one up and then have leftover silver. And what are you going to do? You're going to spend it on the silver store, and then that may create a habit of spending on the silver store. So it's just, I understand they're trying to make money, but at this point in the Destiny lifespan, that is not the way to go about kind of repairing your relationship with a fractured community. And again, this is where we are with the state of the game. It's more the state of the community than the state of the game, because the community is what fuels the game. Without the players, there is no Destiny. And so again, that's where they're failing, and that's again where management is failing. I know that they've been told these things. I know that they see these things. Joe Blackburn seems like a smart guy, but again, it's just how do you get all of this feedback and then just sit on it, you know what I mean, or just not say anything, or say it in corporate speak instead of just having a frank discussion with your community. So, for example, armor, like we have this section here where they point out kind of snarky how that the players have pointed out that we didn't release a new set of armor. But it's not the players that need to be pointed out. Like, you know that you didn't release the armor. Like, you know what your promises were. You have them on a board. Like, I remember seeing the layout of the blackboard that they had whenever they were laying out the seasons in the past, and they have like a specific deliverable section where they check things off as they move. So if you have any level of organization, you have the things that you promised laid out, and you check them off as you go. And so for them to say, oh, we've seen that players have pointed out that this new armor set hasn't been delivered, and so on and so forth, and delivering them at the rates is hard, and it's expensive, and so on and so forth, and people don't even use them. But see, the thing is like, you deliver these like rehashed armor sets, and you spend money like bringing back old armor sets from like D1 and all of these things and giving them to us as if they're new. But these older armor sets, a lot of us have them. It's good if new players can get them, it's great, but a lot of us already have them. And then some of the armor sets that are released, like with some of the dungeons and with some of the ritual sets, they don't even look good. And so once we already have them, we already have the transmog, we're just going to put on the cooler armors because all the cool stuff is in the Eververse store, which again goes back to the idea that armor is hard, but yet you make 2 armors for the Eververse store every season. And then when you have the events, you have a Solstice armor that's in the Eververse store. It's not earnable in game. You have to actually pay for the good armor. Like, yeah, you can get the white glow, but come on, who wants the white glow? Everybody wants the glow of their color, and it's just silly that you have to like tantalize people or take them piece by piece to get them to buy this armor that they should have been getting in the first place for buying the game, and as part of the seasonal content, paying for the season should have paid for the armor. And so it's always just this one extra little step that they go one step too far that ends up creating this negative sentiment. And they see this and they understand this, and they still do it because they know that players are still going to pay and players are still going to do these things. And until players stand up and say, you know what, no more spending money on the Eververse store, period, until you change your attitude, Bungie's not going to change. And these new players that are coming in don't know that. They're blind. They're not on Reddit. Again, they're not on Twitter. They may see a YouTube video every now and then, which is why creators like myself and others make content like this, so that people can have that awareness that this is even going on in the first place, so that hopefully it'll change the minds of some, so they know, okay, if you're going to treat us like this, fine, we're just not going to engage with the way that you've designed these things until you change it the way that we want it, period. And so players can make them take that stance. Me personally, it's been a while since I've spent actual money, actual silver on the Eververse store because of this, because again, I feel like it's disingenuous the way they do it, and I personally have said, I'm just not going to buy anything anymore until they change their ways, or at least acknowledge that they're being a little bit scummy with how they're doing things. And again, that's just my personal preference. Everybody has their right. Like, I'm not shaming anybody for buying anything. If you like something cool in there, go grab it. If you want this one specific ornament for your favorite weapon, go grab it. But it's just my personal decision not to spend any more money on that, because in my mind, again, I've already paid for this stuff with this $100, a deluxe edition plus. You know what I mean? Which goes back into the situation with management. So Joe Blackburn himself or whoever does the communications, like, they need to either step down or find a good replacement, move somewhere else in the company where they're more useful, because I'm sure they're very nice people. Again, this is not attacks on them personally, but it's just like, how do you allow a communication like this to come out? How do you sit down and read your article and not understand that, okay, players are going to feel this way, people are going to feel this way? Show it to somebody first, run it by somebody, and say, what do you think? People who are outside of the situation, like, bring in some outside feedback real fast and say, how's this come across, and let this go out. Like, as a manager, if I owned this company, like if I was the CEO of this company, I saw this come out, and then I did a little bit of surveying and saw how everybody picked it up, I'm like, this is not doing well. Like, this is not how you're supposed to address your community. This is not a good way to go about explaining things and saying, hey, we see your feedback, but we're not going to do this. They spend a lot of time every single time patting themselves on the back for releasing all of this content, like this here, where they talk about all the things that they've released. They go over all the things that they delivered, but those things that they've delivered are falling flat. And so how are you going to hold your head high and say, oh, we did this, 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 and this, and try to break your arm, patting yourself on the back, and not acknowledge the fact that even though we've done all these things, we still have missed the mark? And that's just not in the article. There's no acknowledgement of failure on the part of Joe or anybody else or any of these other teams. They just talk about how they want to improve things, but they don't ever address, this is how we failed, and this is something that we're taking into account so that it won't happen again going forward. The only time that they kind of do that is with the final shape mention, where they say it's going to definitively have an end, which, again, I'll believe it when I see it, because, again, the Bungie has a track record of saying they're going to do something, and then in their mind they think they did it, but as a player or as a lore expert, it's like, no, this is not a definitive end. Like, you left it way too open-ended. There's all these other threads that you're just going to piecemeal to us week by week in a little activity that you can click on that's outside of the actual view of the screen, so people don't even know it's there, like veil containment. So that's not something that you can hang your hat on. And so, again, if I owned the company, I would be completely unsatisfied with the performance of Joe Blackburn and the teams that he is heading, because he is making constantly these decisions that slowly, little by little, end up hurting the community and end up draining the community of their enthusiasm for the game. It's like this death by 1,000 poor decisions, 1,000 cuts, and Joe is at the head of them. It's his responsibility. Like, this is his failure. And so if Joe is the one behind these poor decisions, if Joe is actually the one that says, let's neglect Gambit, let's neglect PvP, let's neglect the core players that have kept this game alive for so long, that saved this game, we already have their money, we need new players' money, so forget the old players, forget the old content creators, don't worry about them, they're not who's going to pay the bills in the future. We're going to completely replace this entire player base with brand new people who have no idea what it felt like to go through this in the first place. Then you have to replace that person, because in my mind, if you want to keep Destiny going, you're going to need to do more than just give a good final shape, because the way that things are set up now, everybody's just waiting for final shape. If it's good, great, but then we're just going to leave the game afterwards if it's nothing like what we want it to be, if it goes right back to the same pattern of no good PvP, no, Gambit's gone basically at that point. Some people are saying they're going to kill off the Drifter as part of the story, so they're just trying to slowly get rid of Gambit, because no Gambit, no Drifter, right? And just stuff like that they're kind of queuing up. That's just not the game that we anticipated years ago whenever we were starting to play this, and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they were going to fix the game, and having that momentum behind the Forsaken changes, and pushing the game to actually have real actual stakes. Like the way they killed off Amanda was so anticlimactic, and it was disrespectful to Amanda. Just to kill off a fan favorite in that scenario in that way, like, it kind of made her look dumb. Like, somebody who's so clever and who's lived through all of these crazy battles to just die because she stood there and stayed in front of an explosion. You know what I mean? It was just very, very poor and lazy writing. Again, a whole nother topic, but just the way that they've handled the game going forward, it's just poor decision after poor decision after poor decision, and it's hard to say that it's not that way and it's just people having these opinions because a lot of people line up with that idea of poor decision making. So when you have people who would normally be kind of like slightly debating each other on things, all of a sudden in unison saying this is not good and this is not good for these things, and there's just so much alignment in people's opinion on that, then you know you're making a mistake, and you know that if that's your job as the leader of the company and you're pushing the game in this direction and you see that that's happening, it's your responsibility to step aside and let somebody fresh come in who will go out there and try to push the company and hire new people and push innovation, and take these chances, because that's what keeps the game alive after the final shape. You're over here talking about we need to make these changes and do these things for the good of the game long term, but you're making these short-sighted decisions that are going to hurt the game long term because you're going to alienate the main core players who will play this game like it's our life, basically, the game is our life. It's basically the last decade of many of our lives, who've played the game since D1 beta, D1 launch, D2 launch. There's just many, many people who have experienced this journey who are now being let down purposefully, and it says it in the article basically that we have a plan and this is what we're going to do, and we see your feedback, but we're not going to do what you want us to do. We're going to just do this other thing, and you're going to like it, and if you don't like it, so be it. You know what I mean? That's basically what they're doing. And with communication, going to the communication side of things, they basically shut down communication because of some unfortunate things that have happened to, like with DMG, with that one psychopath that was kind of doxing him and messing with his family and stuff like that. You had that community manager have to basically delete his Twitter because he went out and said that that we're not going to get Twilight Garrison ever, and it's not a thing. It's not part of the kit. It's never going to happen. And people went off on him. He had to delete his Twitter, and other developers having to do the same thing. Like the guy that criticized Diablo, and then realized that obviously he was being hypocritical in doing so. So it's just one thing after another where they're interacting with these toxic people on Twitter and in Reddit, and again they're having these experiences, and then they're painting the entire community that way. They're saying we can't talk to anybody because of these instances that are so unfortunate and reprehensible. We're just going to stop because we can't find people who are like strong-willed enough to deal with this ridiculous negative feedback and just ignore it and move on. They're mired in it every day, and it's understandable because the game is so poor that they're mired in it every day. And you have to think to yourself, what did I do as a CEO or as a game director to make the game in such a state that it creates this environment in which people are this way? And then also, why am I constantly entertaining these terrible takes and these things instead of just taking the feedback, trying to pull something instructive out of it, and just moving on to the next one? Like, I can clearly remember one time, I think it was around the Vow of Disciple launch, during the raid, I was looking at Twitter because the raid was down and I was waiting for it to come back up, and I think I remember seeing DMG like trying to own this poor woman who just stated her frustration at the servers being down, and she posted a meme, and then DMG snapped back at her with some snarky comment, for example, and he called her out basically and put her on blast, and I even had to take a second to respond and saying like, hey, what are you doing, man? Like, it's just this poor lady is just upset because the servers are down. She wants to play the game she loves. Like, why are you putting her on blast like this and like quote tweeting her and for everybody to see on your account, right? And highlighting her like that. That was poor form. So, there was time where you could see that even people like DMG, who you feel sad for and you feel empathetic for because of what he went through, went out there and, visited that same negativity on the community. And so it's two ways, right? It's not just one way. Yeah, they get beat up a lot, but they also come out sometimes and they beat up on people, and then they just, instead of just rolling with it and just saying, I'm just going to let it roll off my back and move on to the next thing, they have these moments like this because they're human too. And so if you're going to have a communication department, if you're going to have a community manager, and you're going to have a team of community managers, you can't just not manage the community. Either you fire everybody who's a community manager and move it into something else, or you have actual community managers that use the Destiny 2 account that you created so you can have anonymous conversations. You don't know which community manager is making that response, and it just comes from the Destiny 2 account, and at least it's something, right? So that people don't go and blow up their personal Twitters. And it's that idea that you're just going to shut everybody out because these terrible experiences have happened without hiring new people who are fresh and not tainted by those terrible experiences, and allowing them to shine and allowing them to have their proper community management moments, and allowing them to learn and to deal with these particular negative feedbacks, and finding people who have thick skin who can ignore the negative stuff that's not important but pick out important topics and say, okay, well, we have a lot of negative sentiment around this thing, and here's some of the positive feedback that we've gotten, and so these are the things that we should do to create some momentum in this category so that we can have positive sentiment going forward in this particular category by making these smaller changes, or at least speaking to the changes that we're going to make. And that's how you manage your community, right? Like, that's the idea of managing the community. So, they even just have just some terrible timing, right? Like, they just choose terrible timing to do things. Like, whenever the marathon announcement came out, and people were salty because they were like, well, now we know why PvP has been neglected, because you basically took everybody from PvP and you moved them into this new game that you think is going to make you money. And then they come out and they straight up change the TWAB, which has been a staple for years, this week at Bungie, and now it's no longer this week at Bungie. Now it's this week in Destiny or this week in Marathon. And it's just, and Marathon's not even out yet. Like, they did that in preparation for Marathon, but Marathon's not even out yet. So they're already treating Bungie they're treating Destiny like the stepchild, right? They're already treating it like like the black sheep, because they got this new shiny thing, and we're gonna just move Destiny to its own little thing, even though Destiny is Bungie at this point. And it's just a poor timing. Like, they could have waited a lot longer. It was too soon, and they just do that again and again and again. And there's just nobody at Bungie who will listen to the people who I know that are at Bungie. I know there are people who play the game like us who are like, this is a bad idea. And if they say something, they're going to then be worried about their job because of the mentality at Bungie. So there's something going on. There's something culturally going on where people can't tell these higher ups this is a bad idea, and the higher ups then take it appropriately. I know that they've had issues in the past with toxicity within Bungie, but in doing that correction, in trying to correct the toxicity and be open and diverse, it feels like Bungie has created an environment in which this echo chamber now exists, where they're like, yeah, it's a good idea, let's do this, this, and this, and there's nobody to check them. They just push it out, and then they're like, why does everybody dislike this? Because they've gotten rid of any differing opinions, I believe, that it would have existed before in creating this harmonious environment that they were trying to create, and get rid of a lot of their toxicity and toxic work environment. And of course, that also speaks to them giving people, the weekends off, and changing the raid setup, and doing all those things. Those quality of life improvements for their people have affected the game negatively. And instead of just having a core group of people who are like, the veterans that are been there for a long time, and allowing them to have the weekends off, and having the new developers who are trying to earn their place work on the weekends, they just said, no, everybody gets this time off, and everybody can take every mental health day that they want, and so on and so forth, instead of just bolstering that and spending the money on new people, and just making sure that there is enough people to support this particular pace of the game that you're trying to get. So just poor decisions, and you can see it reflected in the content, in the communications, in the way that the game is being designed going forward. They're rehashing a lot of the same stuff. Like, every season now is this new seasonal activity and the side seasonal activity, and then they get boring after a couple of 3 or 4 or 5 weeks once you've beat every boss that you can beat, but you're forced to go back in there because the story mode forces you to go back in there at least once, so you're just there to get through it. You know what I mean? And they have these instances like the last season where they had the whatever they called the barons that would spawn that would come and you would have to kill them, but then like they would despawn if you beat the activity too quickly. So players were preventing people from getting the title because of the despawning champions. And here you have, a similar scenario where in the salvage there's these special bonus enemies, but it's like spawning behind you instead of in front of you, so you have to like wait and then like stay back to kill it and get the additional achievement done. Just poorly thought out stuff like that. It's like it's a cool thing, but put it in front of the players, put it further along. With the Barons, same thing, or whatever they're called. Don't let them despawn. It took you the entire season basically to fix that instead of fixing that in the first week. It's just a priorities issue. Like Paul Tassie's video, he's got a recent one called Priorities, and again, it's just a priorities issue. Like their priorities that they've picked are the poor ones. It's good for them. It may be good for the dollar. It may be good for the company as far as keeping the company going. But again, the company is only as good as their product. And if you are going to let your product suffer in the eyes of many of your dedicated fans, what is that going to buy you in the future? Like, what kind of goodwill are you going to end up keeping from that? So, it's just a terrible idea, like, for them to continue to make these changes and do these things and then to just ignore stuff like, for example, like the trial situation where they don't even have somebody, even one person or two people dedicated to keep an eye on streams, to keep an eye on a specific Twitter. Like they could have a specific Twitter thread for people submitting videos of cheaters and just banning them live and just saying, okay, this guy's obviously flying around the map. He's got 10,000 Wither Hordes. He's got heavy ammo in the first round. Like, of course, it's just ban him. And then to keep banning them. You know what I mean? Or they just don't invest in a authentication procedure. All they have to do is just have somebody put in a phone number whenever they first set up a trials account. You have to create a trials account to play, and then tie it to a phone number. And if you get banned, obviously your phone number gets banned. So you either have to get a whole new phone number and go through that hassle, or you don't cheat. And so that creates it to where people just don't create new accounts and don't do new things because you can't play without a SMS text the very first time to identify that you do play this game and this is who you are and you have a phone number to play, right? And that keeps out a lot of the hassle, but they don't do that because they don't want to exclude people from playing. But in including people, here come the cheaters. They don't have one or two people to just delete their account as soon as they start to cheat like that. And it's proof. It's not like a hint. It's not like I think he's sus. It's like he's got heavy ammo. He's sniping us through the walls. He's flying around the map. Those kind of obvious cheaters need to go immediately so that the other cheaters don't feel emboldened. Because if they see those people playing 3 or 4 or 5 days, they're like, well, if they're not going to do anything to them, then I can toggle myself, and nobody's going to do anything to me because obviously the anti-cheat's not picking up them, so it's not going to pick me up either. Or even then I can play for however long, and then if I get deleted, so be it, right? The game sucks as it is, like some people say. So again, that's not my sentiment. That's just what a cheater would say, for example, and just continue to play and ruin people's experience and ruin other people's chances at going flawless, and just ruin their gaming experience and put a bad taste in their mouth over something so silly as that. Something silly as just having somebody up. And it's that heads down mentality they talk about. They talk about going heads down, but it's like it also kind of makes you think that they're burying their head in the sand at the same time. So yeah, they're heads down trying to complete the final shape, but they're also heads down about everything else. They're just not paying attention. It's irresponsible, and I can't remember a time the community is in this poor of a state since Curse of Osiris is the last time I can think of that it was this bad. And I personally stopped playing the game and didn't come back until mid-Forsaken because of how bad Curse of Osiris was and how poor the game was being cared for at the time. So I actually left the game, like a D1 beta person actually left the game and came back in Forsaken. So I am that player, that experienced that went through that went through the burnout and just, had to sadly let go of the game. I thought I was never coming back. Like my friends had to beg me again and again, and hey, Forsaken is great, you're really going to enjoy it. And I'm like, no, the game sucked before, like I gave them another chance, they're just going to do me like that again. And finally I came back. I moved from Xbox to PlayStation even at that point, and I came back and started brand new, started fresh, just so that I could, play with my friends on PlayStation who were mostly people who were playing PlayStation at the time, and enjoyed the game again. and then when I started on PC, I started fresh again. So I've 3 times in my Destiny lifetime have started brand new, and as a brand new light essentially, and went through and built my character up to play the game that I love the most. And so, as somebody who's invested that type of time and that type of effort, I'm obviously qualified to speak to the state of the game compared to what it is then and what it is now, and say that it's not looking good. Like I personally, I'm going to keep playing the game through the final shape. But if the trend with this leadership continues, if Joe doesn't go anywhere, if they don't hire a proper communication team so that we actually can see what's going on, I don't know that Destiny is going to keep existing in the way that it has been, in an engaging way, to the D1 and D2 veterans anymore. They're going to rely again on replacing us with these new wave of players who've never experienced any of the pain that we went through with the D1 issues and the D2 launch issues. And they're just gonna hope that that new wave is just gonna carry them, and is gonna be like a whole brand new game, like a Destiny 3 basically. And I don't know. I hope that there's still something for us after the end of the Light and Dark saga, but if not, it was a great game while it lasted. I'll remember it fondly for what it was, obviously, but I'm gonna mourn the loss of all the time I played. All the investment into this story, basically a decade of my gaming life, like we talked about already. And I'll just have to move on to other good games and experiences. There's so many great games and experiences that have been released this year. There's so many upcoming games coming up. Like Nightingale was one that I was interested in, because it's kind of like a nice, build game, very similar to Valheim. And there's all these great games coming up. Obviously, I still play Hunt and other games as well. So it's just sad that the game is in this state, and I just hope that Bungie sees all this feedback and begins to make appropriate changes at the management levels. Either Joe changes his line of thinking and adjusts, or they replace him with somebody that can actually get it done, and completely reshape the entire mentality of the studio, because right now the way that the studio is thinking is completely flawed, and it is leading them down this path where everybody is not happy. And it's instead of, it used to be a certain population of the game was not happy and another population was happy. So like PvP players are mad, but PvP players are like, this is great. But now like everybody's unhappy. Like both sides are unhappy, and they're not angry at each other. They're all looking at Bungie like, what are you doing? And Bungie's like, well, hey, we see that you have this feedback, but sorry, we're not gonna do what you want. We're gonna do what we want, and good luck with that. So it's just I just hope that the final shape is the next Forsaken, and it gives us years more of momentum going into the rest of the stories that are still out there. There's still those great stories like with Maya that they have to wrap up. And what could happen with the game if they decide to go and do like the Dark Future arc. Right now we've got all this lore, this rich lore about another universe that existed with Elsie and how that happened, and it's very possible that when we go inside of the Traveler and we unlock this like true paracausality, that we could then go to these other universes and stop the same terrible things from happening. So there's like an infinite amount of multiverse style content that can exist after this, and let's just hope that they do it right. And to be honest, a new universe may just be exactly what we need, a kind of a reboot of the story to where it's told great, and it's got these great stakes, where like we're chasing the Traveler down, we're forcing it to come back like they did. Zavala is lightless, like all these cool things that have happened in the other universes, and we get to experience that in game. World of Warcraft did something similar where they could do time walking and send you into a past experience at that light level, and then also they had like the ability to send you into very key moments of history and allow you to play through those key moments of WoW history. And we can do that with Destiny as well. Like we could defend Twilight Gap alongside of fully powered Osiris, and we can be there for the Whirlwind with the Elixni. We can be there whenever the Ammonites fight the Hive and actually change the tide of that, save the Leviathan, stuff like that. So all that's a possibility, and I hope they just, again, take all this feedback and do it right. Thanks very much for watching to the end of this long video. I know this is one of those videos where it's like, you have to just kind of put it on and while you're doing something else and just kind of listen to it as an aside. I'm only going to have the main article and some gameplay in the background to look at, so I know that it's not always easy to get to the end of these videos. So I thank you very much if you did make it to the end of this video, and I appreciate all my subscribers. Everybody who's been leaving me likes and good feedback in the comments. And if you have any suggestions that you think Bungie might need to see, if you want to leave those down in the comments as well, that would be great. But other than that, thanks very much for watching again. I'll see you guys in the next video.